Welcome back, everybody. We continue our study of elementary Greek here with a little bit more on pronunciation. Not a whole lot more, just a little bit more. Remember, though, that learning the alphabet, pronunciation are absolutely imperative and a prerequisite to everything else we will do after this point. You're not expected to absorb everything I'm saying as it's said, but you are expected to have mastered the alphabet and pronunciation before going on to chapters 5 and 6. You will very quickly fall behind if recognition of sounds and pronunciation of words does not come nearly instinctively. Okay, let's go on. Key terms: elision, and then three kinds of accent: grave accent, acute accent, and circumflex accent. Now, your textbook has made things easy for you. Modern printed editions of the Bible have also made things easy for you. They have distinguished between capital and lowercase letters and have placed spaces between words and punctuation throughout sentences. Ancient Greeks didn't do that. They used only capital letters, no spaces, and no punctuation. And they had good reasons for that, including being economic and frugal at a time when paper was much more expensive and space was precious. You can see here how difficult this can be even as an English speaker. You can probably make out what this image says, but you would fumble along a little bit. Manasseh's son was blank blank old when he began, and 5 years, and so on. It's a much slower process, and it would have been more difficult for them to read as well. Probably when they read things aloud, they first had to practice to make sure they knew where to break the words and where to pause for punctuation. So where does the punctuation come from that we see in our modern printed Greek Bibles? Those are editorial decisions that have been made by the editors and publishers themselves. Here's an example from Romans 9:5. Ha Christos ta kata sarka, ha on epipanton theos eulagetas. Now, continuing from the preceding context, we get the end of a sentence here that says, from whom came the Christ according to the flesh. Now, do we put a comma here? Followed by, who was over all the eternally blessed God. What's the implication? The clear implication is that Paul would be predicating Christ as God. But how do we know the punctuation belongs there? Another possible reconstruction is that, again, continuing the end of a sentence here from the preceding context, from whom came the Christ according to the flesh, period. Followed by Paul bursting into doxology, the one who is over all, God be blessed, followed by an amen. So the theological implications in this case are quite serious. Now, whether we put a comma or a period here, of course, does not impact whether Christ was in fact God. It only affects the question whether Paul was here in this context calling Christ God. So we need to learn some Greek punctuation marks. A comma in Greek is the same as a comma in English. So far, so good. If you see a period, it's a period in Greek. If you see a raised dot in the Greek text, that is equivalent to our semicolon. And then finally, the most confounding of all, if you see a semicolon in the Greek text, it is a question. And that mark indicates question mark. Why? I don't know. It's just how it is. A couple other diacritical marks. Elision. Elision occurs when one word ends in a vowel and the next word begins with a vowel. What you do in that situation is eliminate the vowel at the end of the first word and mark it with an apostrophe. This process is known as elision. So apa emu would be pronounced apamu. And now we have our three accents. One is called a grave, and you see the mark over the eta descending downward as we go left to right. And then the acute on the eta, but going in the opposite direction. As we go from left to right, it's pointed up. And then the circumflex, which is a semicircular looking accent that we have here over the upsilon. Now with the grave and the acute, of course, they're very similar, but they're going in different directions. One way to remember this is to remember that the grave accent is descending downward as we go left to right, as if into the grave. That said, we do have three different accent markings, but we don't actually vary the pronunciation by accent. Again, we're using a modern system of pronunciation that's somewhat artificial, and this is one thing we simply don't distinguish. The one thing that you should do, though, when you see an accent of any kind, is to put the emphasis or the stress on that syllable. So here we would have phone, phone, pneuma. Should you memorize the accents when you memorize your vocabulary words? I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it, but I would put some emphasis on it. Always write your accents on your flashcards, whether you're memorizing them or not, because occasionally it makes a difference. You know the saying, for the want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For the want of a shoe, a horse was lost. For the want of a horse, a rider was lost. For want of a rider, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the war was lost. And for want of the war, the kingdom was lost. It all comes down to those little things that can make a very large difference. So you see here, we've listed many words that are actually different words depending on whether there's an accent. Tis means someone, whereas tis with the accent means who, and so on. Each of these is actually a different word depending on where the accent falls or what kind of accent it is or whether there's an accent. So do write your accents down for those cases where it makes a difference. The rules of syllabification. By syllabification, we just mean how to divide the syllables. And Mounts has given you 7 rules here for that. I wouldn't put a whole lot of emphasis on that. Review it if you wish, but you won't be tested on it. Now we begin with the vocabulary of the textbook. In the New Testament, there are 5,437 different words used, different lexical entries. That's kind of a lot. 313 of those words, however, occur 50 times or more. 313. So Mounts' textbook will introduce you to 319 words, those initial words that occur more than 50 times, and a few extras. And in doing that, his textbook accounts for 110,425 word occurrences, or nearly 80% of the total word count in the New Testament. Now, how does that work? The article itself, ha, he, ta, which means the definite article, occurs nearly 20,000 times in the pages of the New Testament. So that article alone accounts for 18% of the total word count. Congratulations, you already know a fifth of the words in the New Testament. Kai, which means and, occurs almost 10,000 more times, and another 6.7% of the words in the New Testament. So ha plus kai, you're at about 25% already. In chapter 4, we won't get both of those words, so we'll be introduced to nearly 12% of the total word count in the New Testament. So I'd say you're off to a good start. Now, do make flashcards. Always make flashcards. If you're not using some ready-made purchased flashcards, always make flashcards. Always make flashcards. It's very tempting just to learn the words off the page in the book, but it is far inferior as a study method to flashcards. Okay? When you make your flashcards for nouns, they will be listed like this. You'll see a word and then a dash and a part of a word and then a comma and the article. Okay? Do put all of this information on your card. At the present time, it won't make sense why you're putting all that information there, but very shortly it will. So put it there now so you won't have to go back later and do that. So what we're looking at here is anthropos followed by a second form of that word, anthropou. Anthropos, anthropou, like a chimpanzee, followed by the article ha, that is the masculine article telling you that this is a masculine word, the man. Okay, let's offer a maxim for the unit. Learning Greek is all about repetition, repetition, repetition. Okay? So here it is. There's your alphabet. Hopefully you've been writing this alphabet out over and over until you can do it perfectly with no mistakes. This repetition is something that could potentially take the place of some other meaningless social interaction you might have. Occasionally, you might even want to stay home on a Friday night, not go to the pizza party. Stay home, not go play frisbee with your friends in the afternoon because you want to study Greek.